Kimberly Sullivan, the wicked stepmother from the Connecticut House of Horrors, is already out of jail. Currently, as we're speaking, she is walking amongst the public in Connecticut. And it's scary to think about because we haven't had enough time to really spread awareness about this case. Some of you watching this video were not aware of this case until clicking on this video. But the woman who at least is partially responsible for all of these horrific things that are now coming to light, the woman who is partially responsible for these things is already free. Before people even hear about the story, the monster, the villain of the story is already out amongst the public. And who knows what this woman is capable of. If you know some of the darker details, some of which I can't even talk about here, then you know that she's capable of being a very, very cruel person. So who knows what she's capable of? I do know one thing that she's capable of, though. She's capable of posting bond. She's capable of paying her bail. Okay? Which is absolutely disgusting. Now, don't get me wrong, but we can have a whole conversation about how it's disgusting that she's allowed to pay bond and be out in the free world in the first place. The reason why I say it's so disgusting that she posted bail is because it lets you know that she has money. Her stepson that was found inside of her home, a frail 32-year-old man only weighing 68 pounds. She had the money to properly take care of him. She had the money to properly feed him over the years, but she didn't. Once she got caught, once her house of horrors came to an end, she quickly had, $30,000 to post bail, no problem? Because I do believe her bond was $300,000, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, don't quote me. But she quickly came up with the money to get out of jail. But over the last 20 years, couldn't come up with money to feed, clothe, or care for her stepson at all. As she basically kept him as a slave that she would use for chores for a couple of hours a day before shutting him to a small room. Maybe on a good day giving him a sandwich, a glass of water when he wasn't drinking out of the toilet. But yeah, the fact that she posted bond, it gives you a little more insight here. This isn't a woman who was just completely broke. This wasn't a family that was just completely poor and didn't have the means to take care of this man. This is something far worse. Because she didn't want to go a single day behind bars eating freaking bologna sandwiches in jail. But she's fine with giving her stepson that treatment. Treatment that law enforcement say that where he was confided to in this home, it's worse than a jail cell. It's worse than a prison cell. But she couldn't deal with one day behind bars. Yet she forced her stepson to live 20 years imprisoned in her house of horrors. I want to go ahead and roll this news clip. Let's find out a little bit more. Let's hear a little bit more about this situation. And then I'll be right back with more thoughts.
Story continues. You heard it right. Kimberly Sullivan is out on bond tonight, walking free after her hearing earlier today.
While the judge is allowing her to go home, there are some conditions to her release.
We're bringing you live team coverage tonight of the shocking case. We start with NBC Connecticut's Amanda Pitts with more on what happened in court. Amanda.
Yeah, Mike, Keisha, Kimberly Sullivan posted bond this afternoon at about 1:45 here at Waterbury Superior Court, posting 10% of her $300,000 bond. State prosecutors tried to get her under 24/7 home confinement. The judge ultimately denied that, instead putting her under a very strict supervision. All this while the investigation into how this could have possibly happened is just beginning. A welcome sign on the front door to an alleged house of horrors.
33 years of law enforcement. This is the worst treatment of humanity that I've ever witnessed.
The boarded-up home on Blake Street in Waterbury is where a now 32-year-old says he was held captive by his stepmother, Kimberly Sullivan, for 20 years.
Always upstairs on the second floor window, and he always seemed like he was trapped there.
First responders were called to the home last month after investigators say the victim set a fire in his 8x9 room using a lighter, hand sanitizer, and paper because he wanted his freedom, according to court documents. They reported the door to the room having multiple locks on the outside, and when found, the victim, according to court documents, was extremely emaciated. His hair was matted and unkempt. He was very dirty, and his teeth all appear to be rotten.
This victim, 31 years old, was 5'9", 68 pounds. He was in the stages of dying.
He told police he recalled drinking water from the toilet due to the fact that he was only getting about 2 cups of water per day, and was pulled out of school in the 4th grade as an 11-year-old because DCF was called after he'd steal others' food and sometimes eat food out of the garbage.
We knew it. We reported it. Not a damn thing was done. That's the tragedy of the whole thing.
Waterbury's chief says they have no record of that complaint. Police did make a welfare check in 2005 at the request of DCF.
Officers went to the house. The house was clean. It was lived in. They spoke to the victim at that point in time, and there were no cause for any alarm.
Sullivan is now facing assault and kidnapping charges. Posting bond on Thursday, the judge ordering her to be under intense probation supervision. Her attorney maintaining her innocence, pinning the blame on her late husband, who died last year and was wheelchair bound.
This was the biological son of her now deceased husband. She is the stepmother, and so this father did dictate everything as to the upbringing and everything else.
Now, the Department of Children and Families did release a statement this afternoon saying, "We are shocked and saddened for the victim and at the unspeakable conditions he endured. As a result, DCF has looked extensively at our current and historical databases and to date have been unable to locate any records pertaining to this family, nor any records connected to the names of others who have indicated they made reports to our department." Now, as for Sullivan, she's due back here in court on March 26th. Live in Waterbury, Amanda Pitts, NBC Connecticut News. Mike and Keisha.
Amanda Pitts with the very latest. We continue our live team coverage now with NBC Connecticut's Matt Austin.
He's been hearing from the community about the case. Matt, how are they reacting?
Yeah, this is a real heartbreaking case for so many in this community, including for some longtime officers here. Now, some are wondering if the man had been spotted potentially over recent years. Finding out that someone was allegedly held captive in this house in Waterbury for about 2 decades was a shock to a next-door neighbor who has lived here for 10 years.
To know I was right by here this whole time, and he was going through that suffering, it's heartbreaking. I hope he'll be okay.
Zephyr Guanera tells us years ago a family member playing outside potentially spotted the alleged victim, who might have looked like a kid.
She was just a 10-year-old child on the swing, doing what kids do, looked up in the window, saw a little child. She said had a baseball cap on. He waved to her, she waved to him, and that was it. He walked away, and she never saw him again.
At this point, the now 32-year-old's name has not yet been released or where he's recovering. The mayor has asked people to respect his privacy.
It's truly a horrifying, and it's beyond comprehension what occurred here. The young man's unimaginable suffering over the course of 2 decades is just a reminder of the darkness that does exist in our world.
This case has stunned even veteran officers. We're told investigators collected and brought him items like clothing and books as he begins his recovery.
Our plan is to continue to support him. He's going to need a lot of support as he travels through this and tries to figure out how to navigate what has occurred and what the future holds for him.
Now, that next-door neighbor we heard from says he's not certain that he ever saw the man, but he does wonder if that's who was outside doing chores sometimes.
There are still very few details out there about this case. Like, we still don't even know the man's name, right? Who was found weighing 68 pounds. We still don't even know his name. So there's a lot of details here that are still unclear, and I understand why. But what we do know is that this woman's excuse for what they did to her stepson for the last 20-something years, her excuse is to pin it all on her dead husband. This is how her husband treated him. This is how her husband raised him. This is her husband's fault. Her husband, her husband, her husband. Well, her husband's no longer here to defend himself. But to be clear, if we are to believe the initial details that we have been given, this is not treatment that just started after her husband passed away a year or so ago. This is treatment that's been going on for a very long time. I mean, even the principal and, people within the elementary school that this kid went to, or this man went to, even they were calling out issues back when he was 5, 6, 7 years old. So this treatment has been going on for decades. So I understand that we can't pin all of the blame on the stepmother, because I think the father is definitely to blame too, but he's not here to suffer the consequences. He's not here to answer for the evils that he has done. However, she is. And if you sat by for 20 years and you allowed this to happen and you watched this happen, then you are just as guilty. And even after your husband died, you continued this behavior. You are just as guilty. And when covering stories, you try to put yourself in people's position at times. You try to put yourself in people's shoes to better understand their perspective, to better understand where they're coming from. But in a situation like this, I cannot, and I don't think any of us can, put ourselves in the shoes of Kimberly Sullivan. Because there's no excuse good enough to excuse what she has done and what she has sat by and allowed to happen over the years. I cannot put myself in her shoes and find any understanding that would lead me to treating another human being this way. Basically, robbing another human being of their life, of decades of their life, and now their life is never going to be the same. Taking the joy and light out of life for someone else, making sure that they have the most miserable experience possible. I could never ever do that to someone. I could never even imagine doing that to someone. And there is no excuse out there that can just make this go away. But that's what she and her lawyers are trying to do. And by the way, her lawyers are absolutely disgusting. I get it. It's your job. You got to defend your client. But damn. This is why I couldn't be a lawyer. Because there's just levels that you can't, that I personally couldn't take things. And I couldn't for 1 second defend this woman. No amount of money out there could make me go against my morals and defend this woman for what she has done. But in her bonding out of jail and her having this legal defense, it just shows you that, listen, even if she was dirt poor, that's still not an excuse for what she put her stepson through. But this just shows you that she had the financial means to take better care of him and didn't. But there's a lot of other things that I want to say. But right now, I don't feel comfortable saying those things yet because I'm still waiting on some details. I'm still waiting on somewhat of a clearer picture before I move forward with some things that I want to say here. Because there's details that need to be cleared up. And I would definitely like to hear from this man. I know that we are not entitled to. He definitely doesn't have to speak out if he doesn't want to. But it would be helpful if we can clear up certain details here before moving forward. But for now, I think we have enough details to understand the absolute horrors, or at least some of the horrors that went on inside of that household. So for now, let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all very soon in the next one.